Hi!
Whoa!
Welcome to DnDTime Talks, where we discuss all things Dungeons and Dragons. I'm Pete.
And I'm Jeremy.
Jeremy, how are you today?
Pete, I'm just like a potato on a Sunday evening. How about you?
I'm like a hot boiled bacon in a pan of green fried cheddar and mashed potatoes. Oh, wait, you're a potato
You
too.
stole my potato. I got you. You.
I'm your thing.
Nah, I got you, Pete.
I don't know if you did, because I'm a lot of things
you.
and your thing.
Hello, chat. How are you? Hello there. Sword to Coherbionic, Shibidi Forgotten One, Reflected Tonight, and the rest of y'all lurking in the shadows there. Reflected Tonight, the Forgotten One. Thank you very much for your respective resubscribes.
Reflected
Holy
Today
shit.
says all the months. I mean, no kidding, 14 months.
That's, I think, all of them, actually. It's pretty damn close, if not all of them.
And also D Forgotten One for 9 months. Thank you so much. Farfel, are these good things to be? I would say so.
Yeah, I mean, they're okay. I mean, here's the thing about being a potato. There's really nothing good in your life, but there's nothing bad in your life either.
Yeah, except being consumed.
Hello, Diadems. And Ian Grim, thank you as well for 8 months. Thank you very much. We super appreciate all your support. Guys, so much support pouring out today for the DnDTime Talks.
And hello to you as well, Diadems. Hi.
People were so upset that you couldn't stream yesterday that they're just like, no, please, don't leave us again. They're throwing money at.
I was also upset. I should subscribe to DnDTime with DnDTime. They don't let you subscribe to yourself, I think, right?
No, you cannot.
Okay, thank God.
Oh, Data, what are you doing? My cat is being a silly boy today. He's being a brat, but that's okay. You know what? I'm reading what Farfel's saying in the chat. Well, skinned, maybe mashed, maybe boiled and consumed. Maybe being a potato kind of sucks, actually.
Boil them. It's kind of saying so, like, boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew.
Boil them, mash them, stick them. Anyway, so Pete, what are we going to talk about today?
I don't know, Jeremy.
Everything?
I don't know, Jeremy. What are we going to talk about today?
I don't know, Pete. What are we going to talk about today?
Now, you see, that was a demonstration of how to and how not to create intrigue. We're talking about intrigue. It's going to be a great topic. It's really important to games. That's it. We're going to talk about intrigue. We'll get into it in just a second. But before we do, I will say, if you have thoughts or comments on the things that we're talking about today, please speak up with them in the chat. Additionally, at the end of the stream, we now have added a segment called Ask Pete and Jeremy, where you can ask Pete and Jeremy questions by posting them in the channel of the same name that is on our Discord, which is linked below.
Yeah. So without further ado, let's dive into today's topic. So as Pete mentioned a minute ago, we're going to be talking about intrigue, namely how to kind of build it, sustain it, and incorporate it into your Dungeons and Dragons, or I guess any role-playing game adventures.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, you know, combat, exploration, and roleplay are kind of considered the core pillars of gameplay, but I would kind of say that intrigue is one of, along with maybe like comedy and drama. I don't know what you'd put for the other ones, but intrigue is definitely one of the core pillars of storytelling. It's going to be a lot of where you get your excitement and interest in the world, because intrigue at its core, it generates interest in the world and things around. And I think most DMs realize how important it is to have intrigue in your games, but it can be a little tricky to do it well, or to even know what is and is not intrigue, you know?
Yeah, I mean, too subtle a hand and your players miss it, too heavy a hand and it's not intriguing. So
it's just, you're just saying what's happening.
Yeah, exactly. And to those in chat asking about how they thought this was going to be a talk about ruining games and quitting Dungeons and Dragons, guys, you don't need us to tell you how to do that. You're more than capable yourselves. It's super easy. And I have faith that if you wanted to ruin and quit D&D, you could do it. So we don't need to talk about that.
Yeah, maybe just be later. Mean. Like, we can cover it. Be really mean to the people around you, and then stop playing.
And yell a lot.
Yeah, you're done.
and then don't show up, and then also show up uninvited other times,
Yeah,
and boom.
make sure you call into all of your sessions at the time 5 minutes. Actually, no, 5 minutes after the session starts.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Especially if you're the dungeon master. Anyways, let's get to talking about Intrigue.
yeah,
Um, so we got to define Intrigue for the purposes of this conversation. There's a lot of different Intrigue can be said a lot of different ways, but for our purposes, we're gonna try and narrow it down just a little bit. Um, Intrigue is going to be defined as a storytelling device that leaves your players wanting more, asking questions. Um, Intrigue might not be direct questions, but just kind of curiosity, right? You want your players to be engaging and wondering what comes next, even if it's kind of a how do you put it, subconscious feeling.
mhm. Um,
Um,
yeah, and there's kind of an association, I think, with intrigue in a lot of places with like, certain genres, like, oh, certain genres are going to have intrigue, and that's true, but people think like, noir or, a very heavily politically driven game. These are the games in which you incorporate intrigue. And while, yes, you will be using intrigue in that kind of a setting, you should probably be putting it in any game that you run, even if you're running like a very just dungeon crawly hack and slashy kind of game. There's still going to be a lot of room. There's still going to be a lot of room to create and generate intrigue in that kind of game.
yeah, I would say actually, especially in a dungeon crawling, hacky slashy game, adding little bits of intrigue, little bits of little nougats of I guess I don't want to use the word intrigue again, but of intrigue to get your players like engaged and questioning and wondering and wanting to move forward for more purposes than just killing all the monsters and getting all the treasure. That's that's super critical, I think, to those games, even more so than a large overland RP heavy.
Yeah,
Um,
I absolutely agree.
and in D&D, specifically in tabletop role-playing games, as we're kind of talking about it, we're really going to be our main device, our main way of creating intrigue is going to be obfuscating information, taking stuff that should be clear and kind of muddling it a little bit and making it unclear, or maybe playing on some of the players' prior conceptions or perceptions, rather, and twisting them in a way that the players don't quite catch up on, but maybe can tell something is off.
And that's kind of one of the keys there is what you just said. You're testing with intrigue. That's something that engages the player more than it does the character. Because in combat, you're
Yeah,
testing the character. I mean, to a degree, it tests the player and their ability to run it, but you're seeing how many hit points does the character have, how much damage can they do. But with intrigue, you're making the player's brain kind of tick off and start to ask questions and develop interest in the story. So it's more of a player focused. It's more of a player focused thing, which that kind of stuff is often a lot more rewarding even than combat. Like figuring out a mystery or catching some hint that the DM left behind as a player can be more satisfying than, rolling a very high strength check and picking up a boulder.
yeah, and it could be a lot of different things. It doesn't have. I mean, we'll talk about different ways that intrigue
Yeah.
can kind of show up as we kind of. Um,
Um,
the big thing about intrigue is when players do get that payoff, when either it be a twist or they figure it out themselves beforehand, it's very rewarding oftentimes. Um, if you've left a good cookie crumb trail of clues and hints and little tidbits, it can be it can feel really good when a player either figures it out, right? Or when the twist happens and it's like, I should have seen it coming, right? That kind of stuff. Players like that. So, important thing to kind of consider. Now,
yeah.
Pete, what isn't intrigue? Because I think this is where a lot of people will get things confused.
Yeah, I would say things that aren't intrigue, and I think a lot of DMs, when they think of intrigue, they think, "Oh, my plot is going to have a lot of sudden twists and turns," and intrigue. You can have a game that has plot twists and have intrigue, but those aren't going to be the same thing. Because what a plot twist is, that's when you suddenly surprise a player, and all of a sudden, their perspective on events in an ongoing campaign suddenly shifts because they have new information, but that's not intrigue in of itself, even though it kind of seems like it because it's like, oh, well, things that the players didn't know about all of a sudden came to fruition. Maybe that's intrigue for the DM and intrigue for some of the NPCs in the story, but not for the players. In order for something to be intrigue in D&D, the players have to understand that there is information that they don't have and that there are things moving behind the scenes. If the things just move behind the scenes completely undetected and then suddenly happen, well then that's not intrigue. It's just a sudden plot twist.
Yeah, so a great example might be an NPC dying suddenly. No matter how invested the characters are in that NPC, that's not really intrigue usually. I mean, it can be if the players are very invested in this character, but like how they died, that is the intrigue. What happened to them?
Yep.
I think an NPC getting sick and dying over time is that there's some intrigue. Why is this person getting sick? Why can't we cure them? Right? It asks questions as to what's happening, and there's
And
some stakes to it.
yeah, and that sudden death is not in itself intrigue, but I mean, it could be also the
It can be
impetus for
dramatic.
intrigue. Yeah. Well, it
Yeah,
could also, begin setting the stage for future intrigue. It's just not intrigue on its own.
exactly. So, Pete, how about you bring us in and talk about the couple different types of intrigue?
You know what? I'd love to do that, Jeremy. Um, there are a lot of different ways you can create intrigue in different manners in which it presents itself. I'm sure there's a lot that we won't get to, and if you have any ideas for that as well, let us know in chat. But here are a few. The first is political intrigue, and when I say political intrigue, I think a better word for it is going to be interpersonal intrigue. But it's the kind of intrigue that you often see in politically guided stories. And this is the intrigue that comes along with learning about the intricacies and relationships between people and groups. And the reason this is common in political settings is because oftentimes, you'll hear about different people in different standings in, say, a noble court and how they interact. And like, oh, well, you see on this side of the room, you know some information about two different people. You know that this person creates guns and that this person is a baker, and all of a sudden these two people are working together, and you think, why would the bakers guild be working with this arms dealer? And that's intrigue because that's confusing, and that's the kind of thing in your players' minds that will begin generating questions and make them think. So I would call that interpersonal intrigue, but that's kind of what you think of when you think of political intrigue.
Yeah, another kind of way you can use intrigue is by blindfolding all of your players whenever you go to play. Oh wait, Sheba, that's not actually it. Sheba, you tricked me. No, but you can use a blindfold or any other mysterious object. Any kind of strange or unexpected object at a location, be it a mysterious letter, footprints, or a strange magic item that just doesn't seem to. It may not seem to do anything. It might do something that doesn't make a lot of sense. Finding, for example, an orb that opens gates into the abyss inside of a pie shop is very strange. It's out of place and it makes you question, well, why? Um, Likewise, footprints at the scene of a murder, a mysterious letter left behind, and an NPC gone without a trace. All of these things are ways that you can use objects to kind of build.
Yeah, absolutely. And one third kind of idea of how to create intrigue would be what I would call drama, which is just individual intrigue. And I think a lot of great drama in stories is intrigue that's masquerading itself as drama. And that is when an individual or character is, and you're probably noticing a theme here, acting in a way that is outside of their normal character. For example, perhaps you run into the bar and you are aware that the bartenders recently lost a significant other, but they are acting completely normal and are even maybe a little bit more chipper than usual. Now, that is perhaps a little bit of an obvious intrigue there, but either way, it still kind of creates that dissonance between what the players expect and what is happening, which begins to create intrigue and emotions and interpersonal relation, or not so much interpersonal, but I'm just saying individual and behavioral intrigue is, I think, definitely a whole nother category.
Yeah, and I think Pete's nailed right on the head right there how you create intrigue. And it's mainly you play off what your players expect and you show them the opposite. Now, if you just tell them the barkeeper is acting strange, that's not intrigue, that's blunt. You're just giving them a fact. But if you describe how that bartender is whistling chipperly, right, as they enter, and it's a bustling, busy day at the tavern, and you just leave it at that, and then the players put together in their head, the bartender's wife was just stolen, like kidnapped by orcs, or murdered, or whatever. Right, and then why are they so happy? The players putting 1+1 together and coming up with 2, that creates interesting intrigue. Whereas being blunt about things and just saying the bartender's acting strange necessarily doesn't. Um, Sometimes you got to tell the players directly, but more often than not, you can kind of leave things up in the air like that, and eventually someone will pick up on it.
Yeah.
At least that's kind of how I have felt in my experience, right? Even if they don't get it initially, they'll get it eventually. And maybe you got to be progressively a little more blunt with your.
Yeah, that's the trick. Is
Yeah.
you start out, and that's just a great, I think, general advice for intrigue. Is you start out subtle, and then see if anyone picks up on it, and then you slowly make things less and less subtle and gradual in increments until eventually one of your players finally catches on. Oh yeah, there's something a little bit amiss here. This guy probably killed his wife, or hired orcs to kill his wife, or one of the two.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of the things. So, one incredibly useful hint, and this goes for any time you're DMing, players will assume that what you as the DM says is true, like 90% of the time. If you have an NPC tell the players something, and the NPC is telling the players whatever it is, they're going to believe that's true because you, the player, is saying it. You, the dungeon master, is saying it. As long as the NPC is not obviously untrustworthy.
Yes.
And so that's a really cool way to start planting those seeds of expectation. So, if the NPC tells the players, oh, wow, there are lots of goblins in the woods, they will assume there's lots of goblins in the woods. And when they go into the woods and don't run into any goblins, that actually creates some intrigue because they're wondering, well, there should be goblins in these woods. And maybe there aren't. Maybe that's just a trick and it's been talked about because they're actually bandits in the woods that prey on easier looking targets than adventuring parties, right? But that becomes an interesting story to unravel as opposed to, and so yeah, anyway, I guess without going too off on a tangent, I would highly recommend, using your kind of role as a dungeon master to set these expectations, right? To help establish these guidelines, these baselines, so that you can twist them and kind of develop that intrigue.
Yeah, a couple of comments I want to point out in chat here. Which one of these I think we touched on a little bit, but what if your players are too stupid and or complacent? And
That's
yeah,
fine.
you just slowly make things more obvious. There's no player, and I'm not going to say I think stupid's the wrong word because you can be really bright and not pick up on kind of subtlety. It's really easy. I think it's even common as a DM to think that you're being more obvious than you are because when you have the completed picture in your own head, it's very easy to see, well, of course that slight lean to the left that the player he's subconsciously positioning his body more in line with this other character, so it's obvious that they have a connection. Well, that might not necessarily, I mean, they can see the map, right? They can see where they're laid out. Yeah, it's really easy as a player to kind of think that you're being more, or as a DM to think that you're being more obvious than you are. So just be more obvious.
Yeah, and along those lines, Chiba, a lot of the times, especially in more RP focused, I say focused, but in groups where players are RPing characters, um, sometimes, and this is actually pretty common, I think, in this game in general, in Dungeons and Dragons and in tabletop role playing games, you'll find people that are a little shy or a little bashful, and they don't want to be confrontational. They might notice something that is off to them, but they might not say anything about it. And that's, I think it's a really good thing. Just because a player is not acting on it doesn't necessarily mean they haven't picked up on it. and maybe a hint from another NPC asking them if they've noticed anything off lately um is a good way, like especially if you've amped up the hints a little bit and they aren't reacting and you think they've just missed it. A lot of the times they've noticed it, but they're too shy to have their character go and confront the barkeep about being happy that is, even though their significant other's dead, because that's an awkward subject, and it's hard for anyone to do that. And it can be difficult to play a character to do that too, especially if that's not really in your kind of wheelhouse, if you're not as comfortable. So
That's a really awesome point, giving them that kind of outlet in which to safely say, have you picked up on this by an NPC, even if it's kind of, even if it's a little bit transparent that that's what you're doing. That's okay to occasionally be transparent if it makes the
yeah,
story more interesting and moves things forward.
exactly. And if you're laying a lot of different threads for this kind of web of intrigue and whatever and nuance, and you've got a dozen different threads going and the players are only picking up on like two or three of them, all right, have a couple NPCs help out, mention something here and there about something else. Or perhaps, right, you can leave a mysterious object that ties back to that NPC or whatever, something that directly ties in. Doesn't have to be an NPC saying, hey, have you seen this? But it could be a key, right, that someone finds and it has a house number on it stamped onto it, which is a terrible thing to put on your key. But the point remains the same, right? That could be a way for players to track it back to the NPC's house that they need to look at. Maybe they found that key out in the graveyard next to a dirty shovel.
Key is such a fun thing to find if you don't know what it goes to.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Um,
Just
but
a promise that someday you're going to go to
something
a
cool.
place that you aren't supposed to be, which is always fun in D&D. Um,
And additionally, as a last deal, if you realize that your players are picking up on it, right? If you get they're picking up on something and they're just not interacting with it, what I would recommend, especially if you have a couple of different, threads being, put down at the same time with a couple of different plots or little points of intrigue, have one of them go supernova, right? Have something dramatic happen as a result of them not interacting with one of those through points. And so maybe it is the NPC that, I don't know, killed his wife, is what I guess the story we're going with now. Maybe they go and try to assassinate the king, but they fail and they're arrested, right? That's a way that there was no real stake in what happened there, but it's dramatic. Or maybe they go and they join a cult. But and regardless, it puts the players in a situation where, like, oh wow, there are repercussions for us not interacting when we notice these things. Maybe you have that NPC maim the king, and the king's very hurt, needs to be healed, and the players really like the king, or whatever.
yeah, just
You can plan it a
create
bunch
that
of different
thought.
ways.
Yeah, well, you create that thought in the back of their mind. What if we had stopped him back then?
Exactly. I would recommend not having the stakes be too high for the first case, though,
Yeah,
just
it's
because you don't
all
want
scale appropriate.
exactly. You don't want to instill despair. You just want to get them, hey, there are consequences if you don't follow up on these things.
You didn't seek out the presumed bucket thief. The world has gone to ruin.
And he killed your mom. Good job, guys.
Butterfly
No, Shima, not
effect.
that one. Not that one.
Reflected 10-8 says, what I assume is a joke, give up and run a murder hobo game. But that gives me kind of a thought for if you're playing a game as a DM and you feel like your party is a little bit murder hobo-y, Intrigue is a great way to like pull your players into the game and get players who are less RP minded to start RPing, because it, like I said, it tests the player, but it tests the player in such a way that they need to interact with the world in a more RP centric way. Like, maybe they show up to an ancient dungeon that they were planning on murder hoboing through, and all of the loot's already been taken. The one thing that the murder hobo desires most, it's missing. But there are clues around about the adventurers who came before, and now they have, an idea and can start acting, it gives them an excuse and a reason to begin acting in a manner that is less murder hobo-y, if as a
Well,
DM you have a problem with that.
and even if their motivations are purely murder hobo, right? Just as a DM, you can just outright say, yeah, well, I mean, there must have been a lot of, but based on just the amount of
Oh yeah.
the way the bricks have sagged in this dungeon, there must have been a lot of treasure here. There's no way one of those little towns that you guys were just have been traveling through would be able to like exchange this for real money. They probably need to head to the near, the city a few days travel. Based on just how long it had looked like since things have been opened up and cracked open here and the dead goblins, you probably guess they can't be more than a day ahead of you. If you say something like that, right, that just tells the players, oh, wait, we can catch them. Because odds are your players hadn't thought about that, and then they'll start looking for clues. Like, oh, how do we catch them? Right? What weapons did they use? What blah 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 blah. That could be interesting.
I'm just picturing now a scene where you have a really meta, just slaughtery party, and you create intrigue. Just yes, for some reason that goblin you just killed only granted 48 experience.
What?
Just what are with these weak goblins? We have to get to the bottom of this.
We need to cure the goblin population to get more XP.
Farfel in chat, one more to
I like this one actually.
yeah, I do as
lot.
well. If you want to create intrigue, mention a minor thing that has nothing to do with your plans, but just might catch the attention of your players, and they'll focus on it for hours. Yeah, that's a really great way as a DM if you forgot to plan enough, and then you just say, "Oh yes, and also on the side of the room, you see a table, but it's upside down."
Well, what I love about that kind of thing, though, right? And players will just do this to you anyway. They will, if you describe
Yeah.
a room and describe stuff, they'll pick something and be like, "What is that? That doesn't seem right." And especially harkening back to Sheba's question earlier, right? How do you get them to pick up on stuff if they're just not getting it? That's how. You just make whatever they get interested in part of
Yeah.
that thing. Part of that kind of web of intrigue. And that's just a really, really convenient way. I mean, you can throw in literally whatever. Mysterious objects are great, but even just mundane objects that are in the wrong spot. Like a brick in a wall has been replaced with a stone wall has a brick that's a slightly different color.
Yep.
Ooh, why is this? And they'll go over and they'll be like, is there like a secret passage? And maybe you can describe some stuff. Oh, it looks like it was recently caked over. It's actually just clay that's been jammed into this hole and hardened. Like, oh, well, I'm going to smash through the clay. There's got to be something behind it. And while the players figure out how to do that, that gives you time to think of what does this mean?
Yeah, that's a great just improvisational tool as well. Just having these kind of things ready. Maybe always having, and this maybe comes in the category of preparation as well. If you just have a little kind of dungeon prepped that you can put anywhere, and then anytime the players go into a tavern and make a perception check, you just wait for one of them to eventually roll that natural 20, and then that dungeon's in this particular tavern, and the players have found an odd loose floorboard that looks like it's been scratched a lot.
Yeah, right. Or if you go into a dungeon or specifically like a crypt, right, and the walls are all plastered and covered in like paintings depicting so and so. And that's a very common kind of description for older adventures based off Egyptian tombs. But you can simply just describe it. Yeah, as you get into this next room and you're looking around, and you're taking your short rest, you notice that the paint on the wall is still wet. What? What do you mean the plaster's wet? Right? I said paint. I meant plaster. But
That's
that's the
definitely
kind
an
of thing
interesting
that.
one.
Why? Why? What's going on? Who the just came in? We opened this sealed tomb. Who the hell plastered this? And the obvious kind of thing they come to is there's probably another way in. That or there's some secret plasterers who've been trapped in this tomb for hundreds of years, replastering everything. But that's probably not the case.
It sounds like the Two of Horrors.
That sounds actually that I don't want to spoil things from other adventures, but that kind of exists. Anyway, moving along though.
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about intrigue on kind of like a baseline level, what it is, how you just kind of create it at a smaller level. But where do you start to kind of elevate that beyond? Because I think a lot of DMs have this desire to have, as it's always called, a web of intrigue, really kind of complicated points and mysteries and clues that all kind of weave together in a storytelling tapestry. And there are ways to do this. It's certainly not easy. I think even for an experienced DM, it's not easy to create a great story like this. But I think I think the trick to it really comes in because with every intrigue, and we'll call it every small mystery, there is the questioning, but then there is, when the mystery is solved, the resolution of it. They reach the end of it, and in weaving together kind of ideas and creating this web, the trick is when they reach the end, well, then they find another mystery.
Yeah, and I love that. I also love thinking of this web of intrigue less of a web and more of like a puzzle, right? You have a whole bunch of pieces, and the players are discovering piece after piece after piece. But sometimes you don't find the piece that goes directly next to the piece you just put in. So let's say early on in the game, right, you're playing and there is an evil villain named Gorantax. And Gorantax is a lesser devil. He's like a barbed devil. And he is leading a local cult and he's super evil. And the players kill Gorantax and cool. They maybe find some strange magic item that they don't know what it does with Gorantax, but they give up on it after a while because they just can't figure it out.
I'm glad the players were able to overcome Garantax.
Well, hopefully, otherwise they've died in the game. So, but it's fine to have that dead end puzzle piece to come back around later. So they go, they do some more adventuring, they maybe fight some dragons, do some dungeon crawling, head to a big city, spend way too much time in that city, and then they end up fighting another devil, or they end up like maybe looking or trying to seek out something in the city that's bad, right? Maybe someone's been poisoning the water. Maybe someone has been corrupting the local politicians, and like the king has become sickly and cruel, right? And they find out, oh, it's another devil, and they haven't seen a devil in a long time, right? But this one is a horned devil because the players are higher level now and can fight horned devil. And they kill this horned devil, Valgathar, and they kill Valgathar, and they get, oh wow, this devil also had one of these little orby things that the other one, or maybe it's a disc, or maybe it is a bar, or it could be anything, right? It could be a diamond, a sigil, and the player's like, oh shit, this is part of that bigger thing back with Valgatrax that we killed at the very beginning. Was that the name I chose? I
Uh,
don't remember. The point
Granantax?
is Durantax, right? So they find this thing later on and they realize, oh shit, this puzzle piece goes here. These two are connected. And that's how you start to build and unveil this bigger devils influencing the world plot in your game. You don't do it by having Asmodeus come down from on high and throw lightning bolt. Oh wait, not lightning. Whatever. Have fire erupt through the earth and destroy everything in session 0. You can do that, but that's not really intrigue. That's, oh my god, we're dying. Um, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about, Pete. If you're looking for a great example of, actually, I'm not going to stoop that low, but some great dungeon masters can make mistakes too. The point is, building this kind of web where players can slowly figure things out and piece things together is really neat, and it's a really engaging and exciting way to make that work. And having other adventuring parties, I saw Refug108 earlier in chat was talking about a rival adventuring party. Hell, having other adventuring parties, like a rival adventuring party, that once the players have started to pick up on these things, confronts them and be like, hey, have you noticed these things? That's cool, because it's like there are other adventurers in the world also figuring out the same things you are. And that can be really, really, it can be cool. It can feel validating for players who come up with ideas and come up with theories but because they don't have a way to validate them, they don't act on them. And having that as a source of validation is really, really helpful, I've
It's
found.
it's really cool when there are those moments where you just have different plot lines that have been going on for a long time, and then all of a sudden that one small piece of information they have, all of a sudden in the player's minds, well, these two things are connected now. That's just a really satisfying storytelling tool. And as we were mentioning kind of at the beginning, this is something that there are very few DMs that I think are actually good at this, and that's not a knock at DMs in general, because I don't
Oh
think
yeah.
I'm necessarily super great at it either. It's just really difficult to do. It requires a lot of planning and kind of thinking about things in advance, and to create intricate stories that are filled with intrigue. That's something that I think more than anything else, it's hard to wing intrigue in a lot of places. You can, it's just a lot more difficult than winging, say, a dungeon crawl or a random encounter.
I don't think it's necessarily hard to wing it. I think it's hard to follow through with improvising intrigue. When you come up with something just on the fly and try and create intrigue with it, it can work in the session, but
Yeah,
then
that's kind of what I was
following
saying.
through with that is really where it gets hard.
Yeah,
So you really
putting it
gotta
into a greater context than just,
exactly.
the short-term mystery. Yeah, and I think, absolutely a short term just, there's something fishy in this place that you can make, but, the
And
larger scale.
I was gonna say, and that stuff's great. I mean, Farfel made a great comment in chat. There's a rose sitting on a table in this ancient crypt. That's excellent. That's a super tiny, tiny little thing. The players see it like, why is there a rose here? And I don't know about you. My first thought is, oh, it's probably some sort of sentient undead that's in here. I'm guessing undead because we're in a crypt. And it's probably of the romantic variety. They see themselves as a very noble, important character. It's probably a vampire. That's where my brain just went. I am now thinking there's a vampire in here, but I have no evidence there's a vampire in there. And as we go through the rest of the dungeon and I'm ready for a vampire, and then we turn the corner and there's a fucking vampire, that feels really rewarding. And that's just a teeny little bit of intrigue. You put a rose on a table, and that was enough to be like, to really engage. And at least in my case, that I love that. That'd be awesome. That's it doesn't have to be long con to be intrigue and to be great. It can be small, you know, you figure it out half an hour later, or it comes to fruition half an hour later.
Oh yeah.
Kind of
I think in most cases, that's going to be the way that you're going to use this,
yeah.
as just kind of demarking and using it as a tool for players to predict the future. That goes into, in a lot of ways, just good description as well, beyond even
Absolutely.
simple intrigue. Just when I think we've talked about this a little bit when we're talking about building dungeons. Or was it? Yeah, I think we had a whole talk about building dungeons and using kind of information around you, and describing the dungeon to give it character and tell the story of it as they're moving through it. That is, in a lot of ways, that is intrigue.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
Um,
just anything that gets the players questioning or hypothesizing as to why something's happening or what something is going to be. You want to add that kind of stuff because that's what separates a good game to a great game. That's how you elevate your adventures to really be that next level. That kind of adventure that people tell stories about and they're really excited for you to DM. Doing those tiny little things and they're really not too hard. You can just, I mean, literally, I mean, Farfel came up with it in seconds in the chat. Yeah, put a rose sitting on the table because the vampire and vampires are kind of romantic. Super easy.
Yep, really, really simple. I'd like to
Yeah.
point out that intrigue isn't just for GMs.
Yeah.
As a player, you can have intrigue and develop intrigue just around your own character. And I think your first instinct when I said that was probably like making an elaborate kind of backstory that's kind of like their hidden past and kind of reveal clues to it. It doesn't have to be anything that complicated. Certainly, you can do that. But using these same tools as a player, you can generate interest from other players about your character. Um, Perhaps you have just some small aspect about your character that is often kept hidden. Maybe you wear a glove over your left hand that you never take off, and you describe as a player that, oh yes, my left hand has a glove, and then my character never seems to take it off. And every other player will be like, oh well, I want to know what's underneath the glove. I want to know why he does that. Instantly, people will just become more interested and invested in your character as a player if you have kind of small things like that. That's a very straightforward example. I think there's a lot more subtle things you can do in terms of maybe, just some odd reaction that your character might have to a particular consistent thing. Like your character won't go into taverns, or every time they go into a tavern, they get a little bit wistful or sad. You can make it as subtle or as obvious as you want, but you can definitely draw people in and make your character more exciting and engaging for other players to play with by using a lot of these different tools.
The difference, I think, between a player creating intrigue and a dungeon master creating intrigue is, I think it's actually harder for a player to do it right or
Yeah,
well.
you have less
Because
to work with.
with a player, you really do not want to be blunt. You don't want to be blunt. You really want it to just feel like a natural that's kind of odd thing that happens over time. For example, I created my last character I played in Pete's campaign that he was running was a character named Bucket. And Bucket was a half ogre and all this stuff. And by the time I finished describing Bucket to the players, to the other people I was playing with, no one had thought to ask me why his name is Bucket. And that came up later in the campaign. And it's a small little note, but it's something that, over time, people think about. And Bucket's not being too good with words. It's like, well, why is his name? How did you get the name Bucket? And those kind of things, like, it's small and it's something that you don't immediately think of. Or maybe it's a character, a rogue, right, that always uses a stake, right? They have a stake instead of a dagger as their offhand weapon. And, you ask them, well, why do you use that stake? And as soon as a player asks you directly about this thing you're trying to be intriguing about, you have to have like the right answer. You can't just shrug it off and try and be mysterious, because that kills the interest. If you're acting like you're trying to be mysterious, is bad. So in that case, like, oh, it's for killing vampires, in case we have run into a vampire, and that is a good enough reason. And then, the game goes on. Sometime later, you find and kill a vampire, and maybe at that point, it's throughout that arc, it's revealed that your character had to kill their father, who was transformed into a vampire, right? And then it's, oh, that's why they keep this stake around. They killed their own father with it, and it's a lesson, a reminder of their inaction, or something, right? And if you just start with, it's a reminder of my inaction because I let my father become a vampire, that's just like, oh, wow, dude, you're trying too hard. You got to let it build to that kind of organic.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to if you have that kind of backstory. Although now I'm kind of, Jeremy, you've made me excited about the idea of a character with a really elaborate and tragic backstory that is extremely upfront about it.
I mean, that can be fun. That could be great. But that is an intrigue.
But that's not
just
intrigue.
fun.
Yeah. I
That's
just do like
kind of great character.
I just do like the idea of that character now that I'm thinking about it. Just
no, Crowley, Farfel did not wear a bucket.
I assumed as a DM for a long time about Bucket's name was because he dragged around a big bucket with him.
He never had a bucket. He only dragged barrels.
Yeah, but barrels are just the buckets of the sea.
He was very, very particular that they were barrels.
Well, that's what I always assumed. Yeah, you actually always would correct me on that too, and I'd be like, "Oh yeah, always. You got your bucket," and you'd just be like, "No, it's a barrel, not a bucket."
Yeah, it's not a bucket; it's a barrel.
And I was always just like, "Okay," with my hand. Just.
But yeah, and it's just that little thing, right, of always correcting you. No, I don't have a bucket. Why? Right? Why do you have a bucket? Your name's Bucket. Anyway, let's not get too distracted, too lost in the weeds. Well, I think we're pretty much wrapped up.
I was going to say, I think that's about all we have to say on the subject of intrigue. It's a lot it's both easier at a low level to create intrigue than a lot of people think, but then at a high level, it also can be really difficult. And it's just something that you get better at with time, like most things in DMing.
I agree. Now, I do have one last thing to say about Intrigue, but before we get to that, let's take a minute and go through our Ask Pete and Jeremy questions. This is a segment we do every week here at the end of DnDTime Talks, where we go through the Ask Pete and Jeremy channel on our Discord server. You can find links below, and we answer a bunch of y'all's questions about us and Dungeons and Dragons and anything, really. Just ask away. Just be, respectful with it. There are a bunch of questions this week.
Very, very good. V
Want me to kick it off? You got it.
I got it. If you were a D&D monster, what monster would you? This is one big pile that are all related, so I'm gonna do them all together. If you were a D&D monster, what monster would you want to be? What D&D monster fits your personality best? By monster, I mean monster, not a humanoid. And then you ask the same questions regarding to humanoid races.
Oh, that's kind of a tough one.
Gold dragon, I would want to be. Which one do I think fits my personality? I don't know. There's not a lot of like.
I wasn't even thinking about dragon.
I mean, if I could just be a thing, a gold dragon's shapeshifter, so I can walk around and still be myself. But then I'm also a dragon, and I can also probably learn spells.
I'd probably want to be a silver dragon other than a gold dragon. But I'd probably want to be a blue dragon more than a silver dragon.
I just want the classic fire breath. If I was going to be a dragon, I feel like I would be very unsatisfied if I couldn't breathe fire.
Oh, fair enough. What D&D monster fits your personality?
That's tough.
I mean, monsters don't have personalities usually by default. Dragons are kind of the exception to that.
I'm a devious shape-shifting fiend, a Rakshasa.
I'm a flump. I don't fucking know.
Humanoid race that fits my personality. I think I would make
a... Oh wait, no, I'm not strong. Shit.
I think I would make a great turtle.
I think I might make an okay tabaxi, just because I'm lazy and cats are lazy. No, but I'm not fast. I'm a fat tabaxi.
Personality, not physical characteristics.
Yeah, again, it's a little funky.
Oh wait, what am I talking about? I'm a halfling. There we go.
Oh right. Oh, I'm a dwarf. Fuck. Never mind.
Yeah, I realized.
There we go.
I was thinking of complicated ones. Which one would I want to be? Eric Coker. They got wings. They fly.
Farful, exactly. Pete is a halfling. Oh, what would I want to be? I don't know. Probably a bugbear, because then I'd be strong and lazy. Instead of just lazy.
Farful 13, I'm pretty sure I'm just a human.
Yeah. Oh shit, that makes sense. Crowley, a Farful 13 asks, have either of you ever had a moment like the DM in the following picture, and what happened? Oh god. And the picture is a screenshot of a bunch of text, everyone's favorite. And it's fundamentalist fear-mongering video. This dungeon master is given complete control, and players must do whatever dark things are demanded of them. The real DM. Please just cross the river. You've been trying to seduce the catfish. It won't work. I'm begging you. Have I ever run into that moment? Absolutely, somewhere. I've no doubt that has happened. I've had players try and look for secret rooms that just, there's no fucking secret rooms. I'm telling you, there's no secret rooms. Like, we smash down this wall. There's gotta be a secret room. I'm not lying to you. I'm the dungeon master.
I've revealed my hand. I've had that before for sure. What I think I've mentioned on stream before is I had players that investigate a tree for a literal half an hour of game time, and I finally had to just stop them and say, "There's nothing interesting about this tree. It's just a tree. Please leave."
Yeah, I mean, I had an entire campaign just go completely awry because the players just kept just going down the rabbit hole, and then everything went. Anyway, the submarine is a different topic for another time. Crowley also asks, though neither of you get to play that often, Do you have any moments you're really proud of, sort of crowning achievements from the time you've been a player? Um, yeah, I think so. Um,
You go
yeah,
first, Jeremy.
definitely. I mean, I really, really, really love that moment. I mean, the Cole person moment, like that. Just
Yeah,
that.
that was amazing.
That's. I think
That's a
my
legend.
crowning achievement with Bucket, and that's
I
something that I cannot explain in a couple moments. But
yeah, in the same regard,
it was deep. It was touching.
the intricacy of it would require. I mean, it was just a whole campaign reveal I was working on. The first D&D game I ever played as a player, or just as a quick D&D game I ever
Zachariah.
played. Yeah, I played a character who was slowly learning my allies' weaknesses and working to betray the party. And then when I betrayed the party, it was pretty cool.
Why is I before E except after C rule so often wrong? English sucks. I'm going to take a moment off of the Ask Pete and Jeremy channel to chat. Rate kobolds on the cuteness scale, Halo Dude 73 asks. Pete, how would you rate kobolds on the cute?
5.
I would rate them pug out of 10. Because I think they're the same kind of cute as pugs. Bionic Shiba asks, on average, how much sleep? How much sleep do you guys get per night? Ah, that's a very good question.
Very dependent.
5.5, 6 hours maybe. Kind of depends on how insomnia I am in a given night.
Yeah, I get probably more than that, but not much. 7, 8.
Farfel saying pugs are better. I think pugs are cuter. Just because pugs don't kill you, like kobolds would. Crowley asks, cats or dogs?
Dogs.
I'm a cat person. Yeah, ever since I got Data, who's just a cat with the personality of a dog, I've been sold. Cats forever. But dogs are great too. I love dogs.
Red or white wine?
Neither.
Red.
Determinism or fatalism? Sorry. And those questions are reflected 10-8 asking now.
Yes. Fatalism, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm pretty fatalist. Crowley asks,
wait, hold on a second. Aren't those the same?
I don't know. Doesn't matter.
I think those are the same thing. I'm going to say fatalism.
I'm going to go with fatalism as well. Just sounds better. Ed, or Eddie, Crowley asks.
Double D.
Ed the boy. Drake or Josh?
Reflected today. Josh.
Will or Carlton?
Carlton.
No, we're not doing Kiss, Marry, Kill DnDTime NPCs. Thank you very much.
I will kiss the Trash King, kill the Trash King, and also marry him.
I'm gonna kiss the Trash King, marry Bartholomew. I was
gonna kill Bartholomew. He won't share any money.
I'm sorry. Do you? Sword asks, do you have any plans on making a cartoon, anime/TV show themed D&D game for World? Oh, I see. Making DnDTime Worlds like anime world.
Like a world that's like in an established universe.
Yeah, I think so.
My answer
I don't think
is
it's on the docket now, but
yeah, decidedly not. At least at the moment.
Yeah, no plan.
Because I feel like the problem with making to say it now, to make a cartoon, anime, TV show themed D&D game for Worlds, that would kind of go against Worlds, which is making up our own stuff. We'd be using a lot of pre-created stuff.
But Nate, what are the favorite beverages of Bartholomew and Roger? I think we have an open sponsorship. If anyone wants to sponsor us, we'll gladly say it's your drink.
Yeah, Bartholomew also would be very happy to take any drink sponsorship, but Bartholomew's favorite drink, other than that, is Health Potion.
Bartholomew chugs Potion of Longevity, don't
he drinks a lot of health potions.
I love that.
That's why I make so many flavors.
Max Meister asks, I know both of you played League of Legends. A favorite champion? I don't League of Legends anymore, but it was Brand.
Really, Jeremy? I actually didn't know that about you.
Yeah, I liked
Really,
Brand a
brand
lot.
boy. I have kind of three now. Um, my old favorite champion was Dr. Mundo, and then I fell in love with Yasuo when Yasuo came out, and maybe my current one is Tom Kench, the big frog man. Uh, very Julius Frogston was heavily inspired by Tom Kench for certain.
Reflect Today, it says, you've been polymorphed by a mad wizard. What are you now? And Crowley answered the question as, we're bees.
No, I think those were two different questions, Jeremy.
Well, it's a mad wizard. So I think that's just a reasonable answer.
Well, Crowley, well, then I still want to answer Crowley's question. Bees? Yeah.
Bees!
What's Bartholomew's favorite potion flavor? Greed. Money. It's money flavor potion. Neutrino Apex asks, do you qualify as a Yasuo main, Pete? No, I play a lot of Yasuo, but I'm a Tom Kench main or a Mundo main, one of those two. Also play a lot of Gnar. I just love Yasuo because I've always been very interested in samurai, and I've also, if I was like gonna be in the Avatar universe, I'd want to be an airbender, and then they made like an airbender samurai, and I was like, they made this champion for me.
All right, I think we're on our last questions here.
Yeah, whatever the last one that pops up, Neutrino Apex is typing one out, and I think that's the last one.
Crowley says, y'all like smart food? I like smart food.
Yeah, pretty good.
And yeah, I think that just about is a wrap. Thank you guys, everybody, for tuning in, for hanging out and, listening to us talk about Intrigue a little bit. We hope it's been helpful for y'all.
But wait, Jeremy, you mentioned that there was one more thing you wanted to say about Intrigue before.
Yeah, I lied.
I thought you were just doing a. I thought you were doing a setup.
Remember how we said that improv Intrigue is really hard to follow through?
Well, Jeremy, I threw it at you. I threw it back at you.
You hit me with it, Pete. Hit me right in the dome.
Well, you could have just caught it. Well. Yeah, and that's how you do Intrigue. Object lesson. Thank you all very much for watching. Tune into our other shows. On Friday, we have Pete and Jeremy's D&D Time. Should be a fun week. I definitely recommend.
It's Jeremy and Pete's D&D.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. It's Jeremy and Pete's D&D Time, of course.
I have this much more creative control this week. And then Sunday,
it's gonna be fun. Sunday, D&D Time brews. We're going to be continuing to brew the things that we were brewing last time, which were an alchemist class and RPGs for the 200-word RPG challenge.
Yeah. I think we're calling it like the Brewmaster. I think we're trying to not go straight out.
I'm still on the alchemist side.
I'm on the Brewmaster train.
We'll talk about this.
All right. Well, anywho, I am Jeremy.
I'm Pete, and this is
DnDTime Talks.
Good night, everybody.